so we're not too worried there. But there's other people that when that comes up, that's going to be a problem. And I see that soon. I see that coming. People said 2023, I think 2024. But then also, I don't know if there's going to be loan workouts for those properties or not. So that's the other thing.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
All right, Charles, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on today, Matt.
Absolutely. Well, you know we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
I would say cookie dough. I love that.
Okay. I had some good cookie dough the other day. I'm trying to remember where I had it now, but it was cookie dough and a mix of like chocolate chunks, so it was amazing.
Oh, wow. That's the best of both worlds right there.
Yeah. Now with cookie dough, do you feel like you need to add any kind of toppings on them, or are you just straight up cookie dough?
Do I need to? I mean, no, of course. But I mean, any type of sprinkles or M&Ms, Reese's, anything like that, you throw it right on top. I mean, I'll do it. Anything like that, you add a little bit more color in there, on top. I mean, anything like that, especially when it gets a little melted more, and then you can
Yeah, it's like a cookie dough milkshake at that point.
There you go.
Well, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
So I am a real estate syndicator. I've been involved with real estate myself as an investor since 2006 in multifamily properties. And I grew up in a multifamily investing family. My dad purchased his first multifamily property. It was a six-family. It was like a D, C- property, and that was like it was like 1984. It was a few months after I was born. So elementary school, my whole process started of going. My dad self-managed all his own properties, and he bought several more buildings after that. Some with a partner, some without. And so that was my second education growing up, was going to properties. And D-class properties aren't the sexiest properties ever, and they were in tougher neighborhoods. He had a couple that were better. They were in C-class areas, but the D-class ones took a lot of time, and they were just like management intensive. He had superintendents that like handled stuff, but it was just like all the issues you had to deal with, and they're really tough properties. But you learn a lot about dealing with people, dealing with contractors, everything, all the different moving parts that anybody that's ever invested in multifamily especially knows about.
Where were those properties?
So I'm originally from Connecticut, and these are in I'm from a small town called Avon, and these are about 20 minutes away in a small city called New Britain, outside Hartford.
Gotcha. And now, was that your dad's like main job, or did he have another job and just had this on the side? What did that look like?
My dad was actually a like tech ed art teacher, and he left that a couple years after I was born, late 80s, and he went full into real estate. And he was in it like he was doing everything from he was building back then $500,000 houses. He had this rental portfolio. He had and then he would do flips here and there. So he was your all around real estate investor type guy. And but when like the pullback in early 90s happened, it was tough. You know what I mean? Pretty much every one of my dad's partners went bankrupt, and my dad didn't, but because he had one of his partners, he's like just do. The guy was like, one of his partners, because you get real estate developers, some of them can be kind of slimy, and he was like, oh, just do bankruptcy, you'll get, whatever, like don't pay these people back, blah blah blah. And my dad actually paid everybody back, and it's like he never went bankrupt, and he just like, it was like, he's like, you just got to keep in touch with people that you owe money to, and you got it all sorted out. And but that rental portfolio, that was what saved the day, bringing it through, because that was consistent income, and they were very heavy cash flow properties. So that kind of like kept everything moving during those slow times in the early 90s before he started flipping houses again.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when people come on the show and their family is entrepreneurial or comes from a real estate background. I think most of our listeners know I have a 5 and 7-year-old, so it's always something that I'm interested in. Like, how do I teach them a little bit about what I do and all those sorts of things? But so I've got a lot of questions on that. But before we kind of get into those questions, I'm just curious, why did he leave his teaching role to go pursue real estate? Did you guys ever talk about that?
My whole family on my dad's side is like all entrepreneurs, and like I'm following in that route. So my dad's father started an insurance agency, which my uncle took over and grew that to like 5,000 or 6,000 clients, and my cousins took it over and sold it. But it was so it was all entrepreneurial on that side of the family, and that's really how it it's they've all been entrepreneurs. So at some point, and my brother and I are both entrepreneurs. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, never having a W-2. So it was like a real W-2 during or after college. And so it was just something that was kind of normal for us to, be around. Like, you're starting businesses, you're taking risks. There's all different types of stuff. And my dad got attacked a couple times by the shiny penny kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I see that now when I look back on it, and I see it. But he really honed his focus in on real estate. And when he did that, he did the best. And when he kind of like spread a little bit, that's when you just have stuff that didn't make money.
I can confirm that the shiny penny definitely beats your butt. It hits hard.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So he got into that. So talk us through, like, what was that experience like growing up as a child with your father? Were you going to his site visits? Were you doing any of the rehabs? Like, what did all that look like?
So one thing my dad did, my dad never did. My dad was pretty handy, but my dad never did, when I was like able to remember, he never did any of the repairs on the properties. He always had someone doing that. And he would always have that set up with someone like handyman. It was always different handymen. He had superintendents at the buildings. And so when he showed up, and he probably showed up a couple times a week to different properties, and he'd be picking up the last of rents, picking up people that were late on rent, dealing with all types of issues, whether it's just like paying people to advertise some of his apartments. Back then it was like putting flyers up. So he pays some of the kids in the building money to go put flyers up, and he had like a whole system of putting them high so people don't rip them off and all this type of stuff. So, that was the bag. You didn't have the internet doing it, and he had like an application and a lease that was like one page, which is like unheard of today, and like a simple stuff like that. And he had like coin-operated washing machines in the bottom of the units and the basements. This is up north, so they had basements, and you would be like they'd get broken into, so we had them change where it had to be tokens, and they had to buy them from him. So he had like this coffee container like this, like two of them, one with all keys, which was just like insane amount of keys for every apartment, and this like old van he had, and then he had another one which had these tokens, and he was just hoping that people didn't realize that you could use Chuck E. Cheese tokens in the machines too. But no one broke into them anymore after that. So like it was like, people come to him, they're buying tokens. I'm running up and down the stairs sometimes, like, sweeping. My job was always sweeping stairs. It was terrible. 3 floors down all the way, you're sweeping everything down, and then it was also just running up and down the stairs, dropping off receipts. Back in the day, carbon copy receipts. So he'd go up, hey, knock on like whatever, run the, they're going to give you cash. Just tell them it's Charlie's son. Run the money back down here. I'm going to give you a receipt. You run it back up. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was my job. And then I counted all the rent after we collected it. And he'd give me $1 for that. I roll every time, no matter how much it was. So
child labor laws were not in effect back then, because $1 to do all of that stair climbing alone is a little underpaid.
Yeah.
What do you think that like instilled in you though? Because obviously you got into real estate, and obviously you become an entrepreneur and never really held a W-2. Like, talk us through your mindset around how that shaped your mindset, I guess.
You have the freedom, but since my dad was more on, he would never hire the third-party property manager. It'd be too difficult for D-class properties anyway. But if he went to better properties, that would be one way he'd have more true freedom. But the thing was that you have the freedom as the entrepreneur, but you're always kind of working. You know what I mean? It's not like we go down there Saturday mornings. It wasn't like this was a 9 to 5, 5 day a week type of thing. So, but he never missed any of my sports games or anything like that, or anything I had going on, any activities at school or Boy Scouts or anything like that. It was never missed. So that was a huge benefit that you see, but you also see like working on the weekends and stuff like that, which other people in my neighborhood of professionals, they probably didn't do that. You know what I mean? So your doctor and your attorney probably aren't working on every Saturday. So it's you learn about that, the hard work that goes into being self-employed. And then also, he was very good at dealing with people that owed him money, or collecting rent from money, or dealing with contractors. My dad was a negotiator. So you're dealing with people, contractors doing roofs on stuff. I remember he beat down this roofer so bad on pricing, and the guy was like, you know what? You don't even have to give me a deposit to start work, because I know you negotiate so hard, you're going to pay me. So it was like, it was that, and it was just, He was, you had to keep expenses down on those type of properties. So it was, I was like, hey, why'd you ever, like, why don't you fix it? He's like, you can't fix it. You can't do this. Like, you have to do, like, this is just how it is in these properties. And that's just like the problem is, and that's what I love about getting into better properties, because I can actually go in there and you're like, oh, I can do like counters and I can do cabinets and like make this actually like a nice place and like the numbers work out, you know what I mean? But you can't do that in lower class properties. So it's just a very difficult thing. And, collecting rent from people that don't have that much money is also difficult too, being the landlord. And, we would sometimes go door to door, collect rent in his wire-bound carbon copy book, and he'd go in each apartment. He'd sit down at the or a kitchen table, write out receipts, talk to the people for a few minutes, and leave. And I would stand behind him. And like, I never did that when I collected rent. When I self-managed, it was like I never went to the apartments really. It was like, give me money at the door. I give him a receipt, blah blah blah, for his cash. Back when we did that. But I never went into apartments and like sat down and like chit chat with him, for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But he was very good with dealing with people, and all the type of stuff that goes with it when everything's a negotiation when you get into lower class properties. It's very rare, the lower the property goes, that you're going to have people paying you on the due date. You know what I mean? It's like you get a little bit this month, and then he'd be like, hey, can you give me something now? Can you give me something later? How about next Friday we're on for like this amount here and stuff like that. And I think my dad was a very nice guy, so it's stuff that I didn't let slide when I was, I didn't let that stuff slide when I became a landlord. But, it's different personalities a little bit.
Yeah, maybe he just brought you along so that they would feel sorry for him. Like, hey, I've got a family too. I know money is tight, but I also have a family that I'm trying to feed through this as well.
Yeah, I would hope that my dad was that savvy. I don't know. That's maybe.
Yeah. Your dad kind of sounds a lot like mine. So my dad was entrepreneur through and through. I think he's only had really 2 jobs in his entire life. But he's always the one that when he sits down at a bus stop or we're off running around doing something together as a family and he's just sitting there, we'll chat it up with the next person next to him. And he likes the art of the deal more than anything. Like he's always trying to strike a deal, whether it's selling some of our old toys still or negotiating on a building or a car or anything like that. He just loves the art of the deal.
Yeah, it's something that not so much today, because now they set up everything where you don't really negotiate anymore for like cars and stuff. It's really like a set price, but that's why these, I don't know how he buys a car anymore, but it's probably very difficult. It's not any fun anymore.
Yeah. So where did your real estate journey begin? Obviously, you kind of working for the dad, saw some of the real estate stuff. You were able to save up your $1 a week salary to go buy a multi-million-dollar apartment complex, or what was your first property?
Yeah, so when I got out of college in 2006, terrible time to buy property, but I bought my first property, which was a 3-family. Now we call it house hacking, but back then it was just living in one unit and renting out the other 2. It was a 3-family. It was about 1.5 miles from the college that I'd rented in the same city where my dad had properties, but on a whole different side of it. That was, a much more solid C-class place. So with that being said, that was kind of where I started, and that was a little heavier of a renovation than I should have been taking on at that age and with my experience I had, because my dad was really like a arm's length mentor on that. He'd give me names of people, and then I'd bring stuff to him, and he'd tell me like what to do. He's, like dealing with tenants, he'd tell you, kind of like, hey, this is what you have to do, or this is what you should do, and this is you have to do this and stuff like that. Or if you do this, you're going to get into trouble. So, you know what I mean? So all this type of stuff, but it wasn't like he was there, negotiating or paying people for work. So it was, that was a new experience. And then, I got that all taken care of a couple years, and at the end of 2008, completely different from the time in the market from the end of 2006, and I purchased another 3-family, like literally a block and a half away, which was a fantastic property. And then a couple years later, I got involved with commercial properties, because I was in the GFC, and I mean, it was just like, if you're buying commercial properties, they couldn't give them away, literally. I mean, it was just like, because there's no financing for them, so there's only so many people that had money, and there was no bridge lenders really. There's hard money lenders who were not interested in properties that you couldn't resell in like a year, which was exactly commercial properties. Unless you had something that could go for FHA, 1 to 4 unit, they weren't financing that.
Yeah, I've heard you talk a little bit about that. I was not involved in real estate at that time period, but I've heard you talk a little bit about like cash is king at that time, and how money is so fluid these days and so liquid that you can borrow, even to this day in the choppy times that we're in, up to at least 65% LTV. Yeah. Whereas back then, I think I heard you say that you tried to refinance a deal and they were basically giving you 10% on your ARV or something like that. So what was it like back then?
It was exactly what you just said. I mean, it's just you learn how much. I learned much more when I look back on it, and not when you're really into it. But you learn how important the financing is to real estate. It's like it's your biggest partner, and everybody says that. It's kind of cliche, but it's completely true. And think about from what happened in '05, where you had people that had like no income buying like three $500,000 houses, right? And then compared to literally at the end of '08, and I had to sign away my whole, like, this was like Obama did something where like you get some tax credit or something to buy a house, and he was just like, whatever it was to like someone to buy a house, please, someone buy a house. And I mean, and you had to sign away all this stuff because they're so worried about fraud back then with the Dodd-Frank stuff, and it just goes coming around. And it was like, it was a completely different ballgame, and you saw how everything tightened up. And, people were just kind of scrambling. A lot of real estate investors and a lot of people that worked in real estate in '06 were gone in '08. So that was another big thing that you saw, like agents. I had a really good mortgage broker in '06. He was still around. He had a really good book of business. But like inspectors, all that stuff, all gone, not in the business anymore. Everybody had to be new that I found when I was buying in '08, especially in 2009. They were all gone by then. It was just so, it's amazing like how many people got destroyed in that, but also the people that made it through were the ones that had like long-term debt. And I'm not talking like 30-year debt. You can't really get that on commercial properties, but like, 5, 7, 10-year debt, and they're able to weather the storm going through. If you bought something that was still cash flowing, you could still pay your bills from '05, and you were, by your word, you could make it out, and you probably could refinance that in 2010, 2011 without too much of a problem. You know what I mean? Especially maybe you have to bring a little cash to the table. But stuff started opening up around then. So it just goes to show you that, the longer you own property, the longer financing is, it dramatically reduces your risk. And it's not sexy. Everybody wants to do what we were doing for years here in the last 3 or 4 years. Buy double money in 3 years, buy double money in 3 years. And then when people are like, wait, hold on, we're keeping it for more than 3 years. And this isn't a 20% return, so it's like, it's you have to come back to like reality of what it was.
Yeah, I bought my first primary home in 2010, and speaking to the tax credit at the time, it was a 3.5% FHA, so I ended up putting like $7,000 down or $8,000 down or something like that, and ended up getting $9,000 back from the government because I bought a house. So I'm like, oh wow, this is great. I should buy a house every year. Now I kind of look back on it and wish I would have, but at that same time, like, didn't have a ton
it was
of money back
I mean, yeah, 2010, 2011, I was talking to someone like the other day, and it was like when you went through '08 and '09, when you came to 2012 came around, you're like, this is expensive. Like, who's buying it? You know what I mean? Like, you had, because that was the mentality of like what we had just gone through, and you're like, who's really buying these properties or putting up this huge? I mean, it was, and now it's completely crazy compared to that. But you just don't, when you see it for so many years. Like you get really used to, like we were just saying, the 3 year selling and stuff like that. You got really used to people not buying and selling properties, and properties being vacant, and no one being able to afford them.
Yeah. I remember we flipped a property in 14 months in 2021, and I mean, it was daggum near 2x equity multiple. I think we went 1.75 or 1.8 or something like that. And everybody always, like, that's the first question an investor asks you is like, what's your track record? And I'm like, if you want me to be honest with you, it's going to sound great, but I will also tell you that the past 3 years were just phenomenal for us. So I don't think that's fair either. So
yeah, I always got to caveat that when you talk to people, because you're like, oh, because then they expect it, and it's very difficult to, you were smart, but also you weren't, you also just, you were in this market, and you were in the water, and you caught the wave that was there. You know what I mean?
Yep. And I think that's the point of what you said earlier. Real estate is a get-rich-slow scheme. In the sense of you just have to be playing the game. And I had somebody on the podcast one time that said, if you just buy one house a year for 10 years, then it will change the trajectory of your wealth in your lifetime. So it's not a difficult business to be in as long as you buy right, buy for cash flow, and then you're not forced to sell. Time is the only time, if you're forced to sell real estate, is the only time you're really forced to lose money.
Yeah, but the problem is that most people want, they want something that's going to triple, 100, 10x their money in no time. They're not going to wait the 10 years. So,
yeah, crypto kitty money. Have you seen Dumb Money yet, the movie?
No.
Nah, it's on my list. It's about the meme stocks of 2022, or 2020, whatever it was. So you started getting into commercial family. Like, talk us through, what does your portfolio look like today?
Yeah, so over the last year and a half, like we were talking about before, we've sold 6 properties out of our portfolio. So right now we have about 800 units under management, and then we have I'm a passive investor in thousands of units, but it's just for our general partner stuff. It's about 800 units that we have now because we start selling at the beginning of really at the end of 2021, early 2022. We sold some of our properties that we had already on the market, and we start marketing one in the end of 2021 and sold in 2022. So just like going through as we hit our projections and we started taking money off the table for our investors. And, you said some of those investors that didn't want to do it and they're like kind of pushing back, which, it's our decision what we do. But we are, at this time, obviously no one complained after they got their money back. Once they saw the rest, S&P going to 3,600, they were lucky that, happy that they got their money back from, their deal wasn't sitting out there for another couple of years.
Yeah. Where are those properties located? The 800 units?
Yeah, so we have that split up between Florida and so Tampa, Atlanta, Dallas.
Got it.
Those are our 3 main markets.
How are you seeing insurance rates right now in Tampa and in Florida?
It's insane. I know our Dallas property is about $490 a unit a year, and like in Florida, it's more than twice that some of the time. So it's a difficult time. When we look at numbers, we're not really pushing it too much to buy right now in Florida unless it really checks a lot of boxes because I don't think we've seen the end of it, and our insurance rates for just primary residential is up 42%. I read like a day ago, over a year from 2022. So I don't think that's ending, and I don't know when that's going to level off. It's going to be something with inflation, I would imagine. But Florida we have a big issue down here with litigation against insurance companies. I read another fact. It was like this was a few months ago that 86% of litigation against insurance companies comes from our great state here of Florida. So it's just like, it's just there has to be a lot of reform down here, and I think those two things put together are storm, and we haven't even talked about storms yet. So the cost of the storms, so you have storms, then you have the cost of the storms, which keeps on getting more expensive, harder to find people to work, and then you've got the litigation component against it. Really makes Florida a difficult place for the insurance. Everything else is very friendly. So our property taxes are very friendly for having a no income tax state, and we have tons of growth down here. That's not an issue at all. It's just it's everything. Our insurance is something that's very difficult to manage right now.
How do you underwrite that then?
Just go higher. I mean, when I see underwriting that comes through and the days of 3% are done. I mean, it increases in expenses and increases in insurance. I mean, that has to be high single digits. That has to be double digits in times. And you have to see that what your pricing is actually like in Texas, they have issues with property taxes. So you have to know that when I'm buying that property, is this my cap rate and return? Are these the numbers with these new tax rates that are coming through? And the same thing is in Florida. Is this going to be the returns that we're going to be seeing with the insurance? Because I mean, insurance obviously is a lot smaller of a expense versus like your debt service per se, but it's still a very expensive thing that you just can't get rid of no matter what, however you finance it. You know what I mean? So it is something that's very important, and it's something that I don't see we've gone through it yet. And there's people. I mean, I have friends down here. I live in Palm Beach Gardens, so I have friends down here that live 5 miles from the coast, and they can only get our state-run Citizens insurance on their house. You know what I mean? And it's like 5 figures. It's what I mean, for a house that's probably like $1 million. So it's just like it's a lot of insanity with that, and I just don't think that's ended yet. So it's like when you're doing your numbers in areas like this, it's just you just got to pump them up more, and that's why we haven't found stuff that pencils, which is fine with me. You know what I mean? I don't want to be penciling something that says, it's going to be 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever. You know what I mean? And then it comes back and it's 1,500, 1,600.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's just an amateur mistake where you just have to really sharpen it. And then when it does, come back to earth and you start seeing it, and these numbers are all priced in with the new insurance that comes through, then it's something. But just make sure if you are buying in Florida or anywhere, because insurance rates have gone crazy. I had properties before I sold them up north, 10% I was getting 10% increases a year on. So it's not just Florida. We just get a huge brunt down here. But just don't rely on brokers, which everybody always knows, but get your own quotes and have your own person look at taxes. You know what I mean? That knows how to estimate them correctly, because these are your two big things.
Yeah, so I think I heard like 8 to 10%. Is that the general rule of thumb or number you're using right now?
Yeah, that's what I'd want to see. I mean, if it depends on what insurance number I'm using. If I'm using the quote I just got, that might be something we're going to use, right? If it's something that we're looking at it quickly and it's what a broker's telling me, it's going to be a little higher. You know what I mean? Without me pulling our own quote, because I just obviously, you're not reviewing that whole policy, and it's probably not the policy that you really want. So it's just you have to just know going in that to pull your own numbers and to verify them in your underwriting, and then stick to them. You know what I mean? This is not time to start sharpening the pencil for deals.
Yeah. Where does it not make sense? So obviously Florida is a huge high growth market right now. Ton of migration, ton of jobs, all those sorts of things that you want to see. But ultimately, like, the insurance problem, I think, is a pretty big problem, because 42% in 1 year is huge. I don't think you're seeing that across your portfolio. But when you start having large insurance providers back out of the state, and then your only option is really either to pay it or self-insure, like, that's a difficult position to be in. Maybe not while you're operating it as much as when you go try to sell it. So I'm just curious, like, I mean, when does it not make sense?
Hey, fellow investors, before we dive into our next segment of the show, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about a fantastic opportunity for you to invest with me. As you know, here at Ice Cream with Investors, I'm passionate about real estate investing and helping you navigate the exciting world of wealth creation through real estate. And that's why, for the first time, I'm thrilled to tell you about an opportunity for you to invest alongside of me. Over the past 3 years, I've been investing in multifamily, mobile home parks, car washes. I've even become the bank and lent out money to fellow real estate investors on a short-term basis. And now you can come join me. If you would like to jump on a call and learn more about this opportunity, head to icecreamwithinvestors.com/invest and find a time for us to connect. And now, back to the show.
It's I mean, if you can't make sure that if you can't verify that you're going to be able to have these expenses covered by increases in rent, I mean, it's just, your value add is just not going to work. And you have people that are going in like we were before. I mean, there's still people going in buying. We were talking about a property we sold in Tampa before this started, and it was just one of those things that we sold at a very low cap rate, lower than what the person's financing. So they have that negative cap rate. And so there's still people buying that. And there's still people that are currently buying with the same thing with insurance, right? Hoping that it's going to come around. Yeah. And if you're in a main market, if you're in like a major market like Tampa, Greater Tampa, which is huge, Orlando, which has some of the highest rent growths in the country right now, or some place in the Southeast, you'll probably be able to weather that storm a little better. But you start getting out into like tertiary markets, I mean, you're done, because you're just not going to get those rent increases, no matter how beautiful your property is, because you're just not getting them. So that's going to be a problem, when you're looking at properties. Make sure that the comps you're using for rents are accurate.
When you went to sell the property in Tampa, was it like a sovereign wealth fund? Was it a big PE firm? Was it a syndicator? Like, who was the buyer at a net deficit on cap rate versus their loan?
An investor out of Brooklyn that had bought properties from us before. A year before, we literally bought like almost like a portion of a neighborhood over like 3 years. So in this area of Tampa, North Tampa, by USF, and so when we purchased it, we purchased literally like we purchased one property. We purchased a whole bunch of like 3 and 4s around it, unit properties. Then we bought this one, which was like had 2 parts to it, and so there's a lot of stuff. And so he wanted to, for him, he was self-managing them. Not the best manager apparently, because he would call our management company there a year afterwards. His tenants would call looking for stuff to get fixed that he wasn't fixing. And they're like, no, we don't have managed this for a year. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so, but that's how he's keeping his costs down, not managing them. And, but it is what it is. So it's just one of those things that, he wanted to, if he could, maybe he worked out the numbers where he thinks that he can get these rents up over so many time. He doesn't mind biting this in between. You know what I mean? Covering that cost. And then also for his management costs, I imagine he's penciled that in that he can get it even lower. So that's one thing, like, hey, let me add on, 100 units here, 100 units there, and now he can get this cost much lower because he's got the whole area. It's much easier to manage, 500 units, let's say, or whatever he has in that area that are a few blocks from each other than driving from one side and that side back and forth.
Yeah, and I think as you build out a portfolio, it's smart to look at your portfolio that way from a geographic standpoint. If you're going to be an individual investor, then try to pick 1 or 2 cities where you're just going to kind of go all in on. Obviously, when you start doing some bigger apartments and things like that, it's harder to do that. But ultimately, if you're a small-time investor just wanting to grab 10 properties, 20 properties, something like that, then having them all densely located will help not only management, but help you from a portfolio sales standpoint as well.
That's exactly true.
What are you guys looking at right now? Where are you looking at buying?
So our main 3 markets that we work with how our process, our company is set up here at Harborside is what we do is we work with 4 different operators throughout markets that we've really pinpointed here in the Southeast, which is Dallas, Greater Atlanta, and then the I-4 corridor, which we call here in Florida, which is between Jacksonville and Tampa, goes right through Orlando. And these are the areas where we really focus, where we've seen growth, where we've been successful, and really checks the boxes for us, which is increase in population, everybody knows, job growth, everybody knows, but we want diversity of that job growth. We also like to see a decrease in all these numbers over a 20-year period. We want to see now also a decrease in crime over that 20-year period consistently. And maybe there's some bumps here or there, but really that just shows you how much money is being invested back into that community. And that is a stat, as you're nodding your head, but many, I think, novice investors pass over that. They look at what's the population went up? Oh, great. Well, if you're in Naples, Florida, are these people coming for jobs? No. Or like Marco Island, or these are all like old wealthy retirees. They're not renting your apartments. You know what I mean? There's not like a huge educated population there that's going there for like a new tech startup or whatever. So you have to know about that there's jobs coming along with it, but you also want to know that the place is getting better that you're investing into. You know what I mean? Over a long period of time, that there's been, there's a that means that the city's like really put there's a vision for that city or that MSA that, hey, we're going to make this is going to be the next wave of the future because we're investing all this money in. Not just, we'll just lock up everybody and then our stats will go down and then 4 years it'll go back up. So,
yeah. No, I think to your point around Naples, like a lot of retirees moving there, they're not renting really apartments, all those sorts of things. Like that's how I think about Boise. A lot of people moved to Boise during the pandemic, but there weren't native reasons why they were doing that other than to get out of XYZ state that they were in. Let's call it California.
Yeah, for sure. It's like Jackson Hole. I love Jackson Hole, but it's one of those things that you're like, is there business? There's a lot of hospitality there, stuff like that. But right. Some guy buying a 70-acre ranch isn't going to help me with my rent prices downtown. You know what I mean?
Right. So as a guy that has gone through a couple decades here in the real estate cycle, specifically in 2008 and at the beginning of your career, like how are you thinking about 2024 right now? Are you net buyer? Are you a net sideline watcher? Like where's your position right now going into 2024?
Yeah, I always want to be a net buyer. That's my goal is always to be looking to buy. And even, right now we have some partners that are kind of sitting on the sidelines. But we're still looking at deals, not as many as we were before. This year has really slowed down. Q1 was okay. Q2 and Q3, it's like a ghost town with deals. Which is fine. People are wondering what's happening, and we just want to keep on looking at deals. And if we see something that pencils, we'll pull a trigger. I think, we had people that were smart enough to do rate caps, interest rate caps, back prior to rates going up. Usually we're doing 2-year caps because the 3-year usually double the price between, from a 2-year to a 3-year. So I think most people did 2 years. We did 2 years. And if any of those properties are going to come up, they're going to be coming up now, or they're going to be coming up, it's going to be sometime mid next year. But I don't know truly what issues. We have one right now that's coming up mid next year or early next year in 2024, and we're not going to have any issue refinancing it. We were able to push our NOI. We didn't overly leverage it, stuff like this. We had a cap in place that we've been putting away money for a while. So it's not going to be a problem, and we can refinance it with debt, or we can just refinance it with 5-year debt or so, or sell it. And so we're not too worried there, but there's other people that when that comes up, that's going to be a problem, and I see that soon. I see that coming People said 2023. I think 2024. But then also, I don't know if there's going to be loan workouts for those properties or not. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was up in New York earlier this week talking to some lenders, and the one message that I took away from my conversations with them were, hey, look, everybody's broken their covenants right now. No one is compliant with their debt service coverage ratios. No one's in compliance with their LTVs, all those sorts of things. And the centralized message was, and that's okay. We are not mad about that. Where we get upset is when we get caught off guard, when we get caught off surprise, when you call me and say, hey, I just spent my last remaining cash reserve and my next debt payment's in 30 days. And I've already done a capital call once. I've got nothing left. So I think that's kind of the message I took away, was that if you're in this business and you're worried of the fact that your loan is upside down or it looks tricky, most of the lenders out there are willing to be flexible because they also have a ton of that stuff in their portfolio right now, and they're not in the real estate operating business. Yeah. They don't want to own apartment complexes all over the country, so they're more willing to work with you, extend terms, renegotiate terms, things like that, to keep you as a paying borrower versus taking over the property and foreclosing on it. I would love to hear your opinion from some of the conversations you've had, but that's just recent on my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I also, it's going to depend on your property you have too. And I'm a big person that's thinking about that too. Is the grade of the property? I feel, and these are all opinions. Obviously, I don't know anything versus what I've read and my experience, but it's like if you have a lender that's got debt on let's just say a C-class property built in the 60s, and it hasn't held up and it hasn't done this, and it's going to be many years, right? They might just foreclose on that and sell it at a loss and be done with it. Versus maybe someone that has better property that comes along and they're having an issue with debt servicing. This might be something where they might do the workout and, so to speak, kick the can down the road a little bit. Because they did this a lot in 2010 with people's personal residences. I know I had a couple contractors that had this, and literally I looked at the paperwork and it was really changing 30-year paperwork to giving a brand new loan for 40 years. You know what I mean? Here's the payment. This is what you pay. Like, it couldn't be any easier and simpler. No one was trying to trick anything. They were just trying to kick the can down the road. I know this is what they're saying behind the doors. It's just like, hey, this person, values are going to come back at some point. This person's going to sell it, and we're going to be able to break even, whatever. We're not going to lose money and spend tens of thousands of dollars, for a single-family house, foreclosing, and the whole 9 yards. So I feel that is something that maybe some of these banks are thinking about, that if they just they can work with it and maybe extend your term a little bit, maybe not increase, maybe cut their spreads a little bit, all this kind of stuff to work together to keep you compliant with that debt. And then at some point down the road, you're going to find someone that'll come around and buy that property, because they will keep on going. I mean, 2023 has been a difficult year for rent increases because we've had so many over the last years before, if you're down in one of these hot markets that we're talking about. But if you were in but I mean, it's one of those things is that I think 2024, these rent increases are going to continue again. You know what I mean? With everything we've been talking about. We're talking about taxes, insurance. I mean, cost of labor is very expensive. I mean, it's not what it used to be. Your handymen are $35 an hour. I mean, it's just like it's very expensive for getting people to do work at properties. And so it's one of those things that has to come out at some point too.
Yep. Agreed. Well, Charles, fantastic conversation. I want to switch this now to our last round. We're calling this the 4 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
I think one of my favorite books, and one of the ones I always suggest to people, is the 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Koch. And it's just a great book on anything, especially if you're in sales, because it just tells you about any part of your life. It tells you to break it down, see where you see results. And funny enough, it's going to be important. There's going to be a proportion where it's going to be 80% approximately is going to be getting, gets you only 20%, and 20% gets you approximately 80% of your returns. Which, when you look at it, it's one of those things where you put down the book and just think about it, because it's mind altering. So that's a great book.
Yeah, 100%. Our second one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think best piece of advice I've received. For real estate, I think it was buying property in better areas. And that was a game changer. It was, paying more for properties and I wouldn't say overpaying. No one wants to hear that, but it's really you're paying for better properties because they're going to cash flow better, easier to manage, and they're going to appreciate faster.
Yeah, and I think like Warren Buffett talks about his investment journey was, finding these, where can I go get the last puff off a cigar butt?
Yeah.
Maybe basically a bad property in a bad neighborhood, but it's still got tremendous cash flow, but it's going to be a lot of problems. Or how about I just go buy good businesses at a reasonable cost and then just live off of that for the rest of the remaining couple of decades. So,
yes, perfect sense.
Our third one is, what are you most proud of in your life?
I would think, being a lifelong entrepreneur is something that I look back on, and sometimes I take it for granted. But when none of my friends have done it, really, I don't really have friends other than my brother that's an entrepreneur. It's something that you're pretty proud of yourself to it's quite a thing to take something that's not making money and have it make money and sign your own paycheck.
Yeah, we have a neighbor in our neighborhood, and hopefully she's listening to this, who loves sourdough, right? And loves cooking sourdough. And she started doing these sourdough workshops at her house where she'll bring 5 people in the neighborhood and like teach them how to do that. And she was disappointed going into her first one that only 4 people signed up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You have 4 people who you've never met in your life coming to pay you money to do something you love to do and to teach about. How awesome and fulfilling is that right there? Forget about the money. Forget about scale. Are you going to be a billionaire from it? Probably not. But isn't that pretty cool that you made something out of nothing and people paid you for it?
Yeah, especially something you love, because all the things you said is very difficult to put together for most people.
Yep. Our fourth and last one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I would say Benjamin Franklin. I just think it'd be very interesting. He had a very interesting life, and someone that started really with nothing and was able to kind of really get financial freedom and do what he really wanted to do, which was inventing and politics and everything in between.
And womanizing over in France, but we'll
in
leave
between.
That part out. Well, Charles, fantastic conversation. I appreciate you coming on. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about what you've got at Harborside Partners, where are the best places we can point them?
Yeah, harborsidepartners.com has all of our links to everything. So if you're interested in actively or passively investing in real estate, I have all types of information on there. Got a podcast we put out twice weekly. Matt was on the podcast, YouTube channel, everything. So anything interested about multifamily investing, come on over to our website, and tons of free information.
Awesome. We will link those in the show notes. And then, Charles, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.